My name is Micaiah Stevens. Welcome to game design number 14. Let's check our levels. Yep, pretty good. Keep them right around 70% so I don't blow out when I start talking really loud. Because I decided, so we're talking about game design number 14. This is quite early. Anyways, I work for a company called Haven Studios. It's my studio. We're developing a game called Hamlet. It's available on Steam. We have to kind of talk a little bit about it. So we've been talking a little bit this tomorrow, Thursday. We're going to release this at noon for game design number 12, which was talking about world building. And that's Building. Yes, I can spell. I just choose not to. Anyway, so we did 12 and 13. And at the end of that, we're cleaning things up. And then we realized we have a third topic to talk about. So we've updated the YouTube descriptions and stuff. But so now we're talking about game. Anyway, so we're going to backtrack a little bit. We were talking about, for 12, we're talking about this idea of world building, where we would take this massive planet down to the hemisphere, down to the individual castles and building and stuff like that. And then in the buildings themselves, we talked about the dungeon sits in the world somewhere, but it's sort of like this building idea is where we're going with. Today we're going to be talking about item building. So we're going to go backtrack a little bit, showcase what we're talking about. I think because it gives a good idea of where this fits, same with the dungeons, where the dungeon actually fits in the world. And we have this demo document that's just kind of a third game design. It's kind of like a design philosophy is kind of where we're going with this and what we think works. So I guess that's it. Right on to the demo document. So the main kind of topic is this RPG design. We started this about a month ago, I think, and talking about various things. See, I like a word because it's much easier to say, hey, there's Lindy Beige is misspelled. I don't know if that's the case. But anyway, so we're talking about this idea of RPG design. We are focused on an RPG because that's what we decided a couple years ago. Is our focus. We love still space games and other games, but this is kind of our focus for a while. So we're talking about items in our world. The items are massive. It's well, okay, sorry. So I'm in our world. No, I'm thinking about the real world. Items in the real world are massive. It's inconceivable to have that many items in a game. And then it sort of gets. Some people try to emulate that, and I think it gets. We talk about this bloat, which is kind of the subtopic of this item bloat. So there's world bloat, such as fauna. There's just massive faunas, and then items. The rooms, and just insane how many things are there, which is kind of a hide and seek approach to things. But that's not really the design we tend to like to go for. So one thing. So we'll hopefully kind of talk about these subjects as we go, and they'll probably make a little bit more sense. So one thing we were talking about the dungeon ceilings, sort of the dungeon design, this kind of the second part. You see this sort of entrance to the dungeon, these rooms. He has this nice little effect graphics. You got characters, they have, who knows, they're just little characters and they have animations and they're looking for treasure. One thing that sort of makes this not as exciting is there's nothing there. The world is bland and blank. Even the blocking feels kind of like you can sort of see these stairs, but there's not really much else. And that's purposely by design, but it's sort of one thing that, and it's like here, how do these people get down this hole? There's no ladder. Do they just drop down and maybe have rope? Maybe that's what this thing is supposed to be, rope. Anyways, and then we talk about this other sort of dungeon from Shadowversary. I don't think this is his image. He just found this Google image he liked, and I like it as well. So you can see that there's it's not. I don't think this is as bloaty as I was in. But the problem. Part of the problem that we've been talking about is the use of the items. You can see that there's some sort of collapse. It just feels like there's like a ceiling collapse. Maybe it's like this this ceiling collapsed, and that's where they're entering in from this. And there may be, but there's kind of stairs this way, so who knows? But there's and then you can sort of see there's torches on the wall, and then there's sort of beams or extra wood around. There's a lot of dirt, little rocks and pebbles and things like that. So it's always bugged me about these games. It's like you have rocks to shoot, And it's like you walk through a dungeon similar to this, and there's like tons of rocks on the ground, but you can't pick up a single rock because, it's not interactable. That's kind of what we're talking about. And similar for this idea of War for the Underworld, um, you have characters. There's various. There's not a lot of items, so it's kind of. I think that's kind of one of the things I was thinking about when I was talking about this. Um, there's very few items. Candles and stuff. But anyway, so that's sort of then we get to this topic of world fauna, and it's kind of like this idea of in the world for a lot of games, and this is kind of that bloat that comes into place for a lot of games. And it's not to say Ark Survival Involved, which is a game we're showcasing here. It's not to say this isn't a fun game, and it's really cool to run around the world, collect resources, which a lot of these are resources on the ground that you can pick up, and then that at first, and a lot of it's too is like you collect leaves and sticks and various starter resources that you ignore later on because you have steel and iron and all sorts of things. But the concern for me is there's a lot of grass and a lot of things out here that seem like they're in the world, but they don't actually do anything. So it's like when you're looking for, and it's like that hide and seek approach. It's cool when there's a lot of grass out there and you're a herbalist looking for a very specific red flower or something unique out in the world, and you see this big grass field, and also you can see this tiny bit of red, and you're like, oh, okay, and you start looking around for it. That's interesting and gameplay elements. But in most games, it's like this bloat just becomes insane. Uh, and then part of though is Minecraft is really cool because there's a lot of bloat in the world. Very similar to it's not. We're not talking about graphics. We're just talking about the grass. But in Minecraft, a lot of this grass can be harvested. You can use a scythe for some mods. You can see the red flowers, the yellow flowers. You see these spider webs, iron bar. That's the other thing too. You get these. Minecraft is really cool in that aspect of the world. That everything around you, every block, brick, item, everything that's there can be picked up and used if you want that. You can just basically come down and pick up every single. It's interesting too. It's like maybe there's a bad wizards out there that are like EMC hordes, so they'll come to a world and just like eat the entire world for an EMC planet, which is great because it's everything in the game is used. But then we started with this talk about item bloat, and this is reality of item bloat. And this is like you would see this in games a lot, but this is kind of how our world. That's kind of what I was talking about. That our world. We're not talking about the Haven planet or the Haven world. I'm talking about the planet Earth and what we see. And we just did this Google image search for a blacksmith shop, and it's like you can see his anvil here. It's kind of, as a person that doesn't really understand a lot. I understand tools and mechanics and what they're trying to accomplish sometimes, but for me it's like especially with my bad eyesight, these just become meaningless. Maybe if we got a closer look on some of these, but you can sort of see that there is an anvil here. He does have these strapped down. I don't know, it's hard to tell, but these could be like the anvil maybe is strapped down, tied down, so it's on this block, and he's working on it. And he has, and he has a forge. It looks like over here. This is like a dolly. And for him, all these tools might be necessary, or useful at some point, in the future. And he needs a lot of these things, depending on what he's working on. That's just the reality. And then one of these, we're talking about this, and partly it's because I was thinking about this blacksmith kit. It's from 3D Forge, which I thought, hey, it's a really great. So you can see that there's a lot of busy stuff in here, but a lot of these are just sort of models in the game that don't actually really do a lot of things. But there are certain things, but you can see, this is kind of what the forge looks like, which is very, very similar to this forge. It's a 3D model out of it. And now you can see down here, this one's called my blacksmith. Oh, do I have is this a? No, I don't think this is a. I thought I had a demo here at some point as well. I don't think there's a. Is this just an image? Where? Oh yeah, okay. There's a demo here. So this is a little bit. So you can kind of see there's a blacksmith here. There's copper or I don't know ingots here, and then there's water and various stuff around. And he can actually you can interact with the. Sorry, it seems kind of little. But so you can actually interact with that stuff. And my blacksmith shop is really cool. There's a lot of world fauna that sort of maybe you can interact with some of that too. Um, but yeah, and then the sort of so the kind of the goal for me would be sort of the Minecraft is kind of the point of this. The goal for me would be the Minecraft world aspect of every item in the game is usable, and versus not every item in this game. It's a different mindset, but it gives a little bit of depth and coolness to the world. But it's not. It for me it just doesn't make every item in the game usable, and that's kind of like the grass here is like you may not be able to maybe you don't need the grass, maybe it's not that type of game that you pick up sticks and the grass is sort of like meaningless to you. But and I think in some sense of the word that's one of the design as we're talking about here is the fact that every single item piece object in the world is usable, and it's not going to be it's less realistic in that sense of the word that there would be a lot of stuff around, and it sort of depends on the type of game you play. Like if you're doing a survival game, let's see images, survival game, and you look at sort of like trying to think of how to find a good example of the fact that there's a lot of these are more like Starbound and Terraria, which are much more Minecraft-y, but there is a lot of themes of survival games. Well, the world aspect of it too, of trying to build a world and make it look real. There's a balance there, but I'm kind of thinking of more survival games that are like post-apocalypse, maybe that'd be a better word for it. Post-apocalypse, survival game. Yeah, like kind of this example might be I'm not sure what game this is, but the Darwin Project. But you can sort of see that there's there's cars, there's a lot of things in the world. Nah, it's not kind of what we're going for. But there's a lot of things in the world that you sort of like junkyards, and here's a T-Rex, and there's a bus, and there's things, and what game is this? So it's like there's so much things in the world, but you only can pick up so much. That you go through the world, and there's just a lot of space games are like that. There's a lot of space junk that has nothing to do with the game, but you don't, and that's sort of it's an interesting style of game where it's like you don't know like here you don't know what's valuable or what's not valuable, and that's kind of usually maybe there's a button on here that eventually lights up, but really this is just setting up the aesthetic of the world, not actually the reality of the world. Sorry, I should be prefacing this with a lot of these are it's always and here's there's massive stuff in the world to pick up, that and guns and weapons and ammos and stuff, but what's actually used, and we're kind of where the focus is on what we actually see in the game, like this aspect of there's a lot of things around you, and but you can't actually interact with any of them. Here's another just massive stuff. Here's another one. There's just massive things everywhere in these worlds, and it's sort of like interesting aspects of sorting through garbage. But I always kind of think about whenever, like for instance, when you kill, if there's a and we talked a little bit about this. If we're in a dungeon and we kill another adventurer or another bad adventure, whatever, there's some sort of battle there, and you win. It's like all of a sudden you get one item off them, It's like what happened to the rest of the item? If you used some explosive fireball or some acid spell, yeah, you would destroy the items. But when they drop their items, you pretty much you have. That's the goal of my game is to have the ability to pick up everything they have. You can't carry everything they have, but every single item, weapon, piece of gear, water bottle, everything in the game that they had at that point is droppable. And that's sort of like, and if you want to, and if that's like one of those things, if you want to go through, I thought about like a mercenary game like this. If you want to, and it's like, the mercenary game of you're a mercenary company and you run into another mercenary company, take them out, and you have X amount of time before you're discovered, or you can grab, maybe it's like you always see all the time scavenging different pieces of gear, and that's sort of it, like the scavenging sort of things. Like, can you go? How fast can you pick up? Go through someone's pockets, grab their cash, grab their extra ammo. Like, especially ammo. That's what people are looking for a lot. It's like, when you get into a firefight, you're like, oh, I only carried so much ammo, and now I've used up, so much of my ammo. So now I gotta, go through and grab something. This one's actually a really interesting one too. Is like, I wish is this Neo Scavenger? Yeah, let's search for Neo Scavenger. Actually, oh no, come on. Anyway, so it's like this idea, and that's part of what I am. I'm gonna try to do. I'm not sure if there's a way to get a good image, but there's just a lot of stuff in this game. Yeah, I love how it's like. Well, it's like a lot of it's like some of this might be actually cool. I don't know, but anyways, that's the design goal that we're trying to accomplish here, and I think we've sort of made the point in 15 minutes, which is our goal. So, so we're just talking about this idea of game design, and it doesn't have to be an RPG. This is all part of design ideas that could be whatever game I'm working on. That's kind of the one of the goals I have is this item bloat. And as part of this world building aspects, where it's the document that we want. Yeah, from here. And it really kind of starts with this is what our world looks like. And, I've seen games that sort of try to emulate this, but then it's like you can't, you're hard pressed. And part of it, too, is like how to get the animations. And, my blacksmith is like they have, basic tools. I don't remember if this is called My Blacksmith or Blacksmith Shop, but there's many types of games like this that sort of emulate the same idea of building a blacksmith. But then, and that's sort of it. This guy is using 20 or 30 or, multiple different tools, but you can't, it's sort of like that simulated aspect. Games are simulated. We can't do, as sort of like it's inconceivable to build the world in such a way that it's into such a way because we abstract out, and even if this stuff like that's sort of it. Do we, what kind of level are we abstracting out? Do we, are these dirt piles and these rocks, are they, aesthetics? Are they actually something that's useful? And like, do you really want to know? Like, I'm actually one of the things I'm talking about in my world right now is there's a dungeon floor tile here, which is sitting on ground, which do you actually dig down? And it's sort of like that's one of the things. Like, can you, do you have the time and effort and tools to dig down? It's like right here. Like if you're here, you can dig straight down. What's the, will you? And that's part of it. Will you create a tunnel collapse and you do that? Do you have the tools and resources to do that safely? And if you don't, this stuff starts happening, and it's like then it's like you now have to hire workers to dig this out, and it's going to take extra lawn, and same here. It's like this, and that's sort of it. It's like the game, implements these like we're talking about RimWorld implements an idea that the ceiling can collapse, and then you have to salvage and pick up all that stuff that broke, and things can break. And this kind of like it gets, and this is kind of a really another good example of Survival Evolved, where you can pick up sticks and things, but you can't pick up everything. And I like Minecraft is probably the best example for me where it's busy, but it's also everything is farmable, and that's even to say that everything is basically can be broken down is the EMC, which is a specific type of like a resource. It breaks every single item down into this number that you have, this energy or this liquid or whatever you want to call it. It's magical value, which is just a float or some sort of gold or something. And that's also true in my game. Also, is that everything should be able to break down. Is grass valuable? Probably to some people it is, but and to hay and to mulch and various resources, and that's the goal, is to just have everything be usable and creatable. But give a little bit of there's going to be a fine balance between putting a little bit of aesthetic value into the world, because that's the thing about this is you don't want the world to look like this, and maybe you can't look like this, but there's some balance in between where it's like you give a little bit of aesthetics, and maybe it's like these torches are just like they're embedded into the wall, and it's like it would take too much effort to, and maybe we abstract that out. And I think part of it too is like there's going to be torches on walls, but we haven't built the technology to be able to walk up and fill up the torches with oil or replace the torches. But right now they're just permanent torches that add light, magical light or something, and there's so there's a balance there between having the item in the game versus needing to have the item in the game for for light sources and various resources, and then having it be and then part of it too is like these I was thinking about these benches down here. It's like in this one, these benches we're kind of thinking about that right now of we have wood, and we're breaking it down to planks, and we can break, but how do we build these items without sort of and that's part of like this abstracted idea in Minecraft where it's like you take 3 sticks, which makes a wood makes 2 planks, and 2 planks make a stick, and then the stick is kind of like you can't you just and then it's like you can like, and then I'm saying, and then you take 3 planks and 2 sticks, and you can build a workbench, or 4 planks, and you can make a workbench. Well, at some mods allow you to tear that down and to get maybe 2. That's true too. It's like when you build this together with nails and you tear it down, you're going to get some planks back, but they're not always going to be as valuable. Maybe it could be firewood at that point as well. Like you get junk wood back. That's just it. It's like that's kind of the economy of what we're thinking about is you have wood, really valuable wood that so I was thinking about this ideas for castles. You have this log that's a 10-foot log that's circular, that's and they have like 20 of these, and they put a spike or sand down a spike on top, and then you have this wall, and then you can eventually tear down that wall or reinforce it with stone, or build up from there. It's like you have the fort to the keep to the and that's kind of how these things were built up from there. Or you could say tear that down a section of the wall because it got damaged, and then you got these you can use some of that wood. It's like there's you can reclaim some of that wood, and it's all this economy system that allows you to do that sort of thing. It's like abstracting out some of these ideas. Like you can take these swords and melt them down, and maybe he does that all the time. He probably has slag that he sort of can reclaim. So there's a lot of concepts like that, but it's just kind of depending on how you build the world aesthetically versus real life versus actually getting it to work. And maybe this blacksmith shop has these very simple tools and water and concepts, and then later on as the world, and that's sort of like where Hamlet's going. It's like you have this really simple world that we want to extend and build on and keep building so it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, in such a way that hopefully works. So anyways, that's a pretty good overview of items, and sort of what we're the design philosophy of items, of having items to be, I'm trying to think of how to get this wrap this up without going in. Let's just kind of talking about, I guess up here is a really good sort of talking about that they're just talking about the RPG's design. And the goal, item bloat, and that's sort of a great bloat is sort of like it's just there's so much, it's just overwhelming, and that's like how this in our items in our world are massive. There's just we could not. It's inconceivable. In the Earth, it's how many particles and elements and items and different types of items and swords. You got 300 different types of swords, and what era is the sword from, and what it's the a bastard sword, a lawn sword, a knight sword, a British sword, a Roman sword, and it's like it's inconceivable to carry forth that into a game, and that also includes the world as well. Uh, you know, and in terms of the dungeon rooms and what they are used for and what they actually meet up to be, and add they'll add in certain elements of ceilings collapsing like we're talking about, but it's just it's like, and that gets down to the simulation. The simulation is the balance. How do you balance out the massive overwhelming thing that you can't do and that's where the word simulation really comes into this. Games are simulated environments that abstract out the core concepts into a game, and versus a blacksmith shop, as one example, and that's why they're trying to extract out this. And this is kind of the realistic point, the middle point, and then the low point. And that's sort of the same thing here. It's like we've got this, we could showcase, a forest with maybe not dinosaurs but critters, and then here's this idea. It's and there's a lot of this is like there's bugs and all sorts of things that are missing, but it's sort of simulating the fact that this environment and down to this Minecraftian level of everything's usable. And that's kind of where this is the perfect example of everything is usable. Every item, this wooden sword comes from the wood over here. And this iron, it comes from the ground that you melt, and melt iron into ingots, and ingots into swords and bars and all sorts of things, and eventually you can tear that apart as well, depending on the mod sort you play with. So I think this is the Minecraft is the goal, just because it's really has a lot of really cool design principles, and that's kind of what we're going for here. So anyways, this has been game design number 13. My name has been Micaiah Stevens. I appreciate everybody following along. I hope these are just as exciting. Some of these are not very code heavy. Some of these are more, that's kind of what the idea of game design was, just talking about the game design in general. Anyways, so you can leave a comment, clap, or email me if that's awesome for you. Anyways, thanks very much. You have a great time. I'll see you in a few weeks from now, and hopefully we'll work on the next one. You take care.